We all have an enemy. Not outside us, not some grand external force plotting our downfall. No, this enemy resides within, a silent saboteur, a master of disguise. It whispers sweet nothings of superiority, stokes the fires of insecurity, and blinds us to the stark reality of who we truly are. This enemy is your ego. For the next couple of minutes, we will strip away its pretenses, expose its machinations, and confront the uncomfortable truths it desperately tries to hide. Are you prepared to face the true enemy within? Consider the weight of that statement. The true enemy within. It's a profound idea, one that echoes through the annals of philosophy and psychology, a recurring theme for those who dared to look beyond the superficial. Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who stared into the abyss of human nature, understood the deceptive power of the self. He saw how our personal narratives, our perceived importance, could become shackles, limiting our potential. He challenged us to become who we are, a journey that necessitates shedding the false identity crafted by the ego. But what is this ego we speak of? Is it simply self-esteem, confidence, or something far more insidious? Is your ego a loyal ally or a cunning adversary disguised as one? Let's start with a foundational understanding. In the realm of psychology, particularly through the lens of Carl Jung, your ego is merely the center of your conscious awareness. It's the I that experiences, that thinks, that feels. But the problem arises when this I inflates, when it believes itself to be the entirety of who we are, rather than just a small, albeit crucial part. It's like a single captain believing they are the entire ship, the crew, and the ocean itself. This is where your ego becomes a tyrant, not a servant. Ryan Holiday, in his seminal work, Ego is the Enemy, presents a compelling argument for humility and a constant awareness of ego's traps. He shows us how this internal enemy can sabotage ambition, success, and even our most meaningful relationships. It's the voice that tells you you're too good for a task, too important to fail, too wise to learn. And that voice, my friends, is a lie. When was the last time your ego convinced you to not do something that would have genuinely challenged and grown you? Say this affirmation with me. My ego's whispers are not my truth. Think about the brilliant mind of Arthur Schopenhauer. He understood the suffering inherent in human existence, much of which he attributed to our insatiable will, our desires, our attachments, all fueled by the ego's relentless pursuit of self-validation and gratification. For Schopenhauer, true peace lay in transcending this will, in seeing through the illusion of individual importance. A harsh philosophy, perhaps, but one that undeniably points to your ego as a primary source of your discontent. Let's imagine a common scenario. You're working on a project, something you've poured your heart and soul into. Someone offers constructive criticism. How does your ego react? Does it bristle with indignation? Does it immediately search for reasons to discredit the feedback? Or can you, for a moment, set aside your defensiveness and genuinely consider their perspective? The ego craves validation, not improvement. It demands praise, not honest assessment. Let me ask you a question. When faced with criticism, do you instinctively defend your ego or genuinely seek understanding? Make this declaration: I choose growth over ego's defense. The Russian literary giant, Fyodor Dostoevsky, delves into the darkest corners of the human psyche, often portraying characters consumed by their own pride, their self-importance, their wounded egos. Think of Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, convinced of his own exceptionalism, believing himself above moral law. His ego, in its inflated state, leads him down a path of immense suffering and psychological torment. Dostoevsky shows us, with chilling clarity, the destructive power of an unchecked ego. It can warp our perception of reality, justify the unjustifiable, and alienate us from our fellow human beings. The ego loves to compare. It constantly measures itself against others, better than, worse than, smarter than, richer than. This perpetual comparison is a breeding ground for envy, resentment, and a deep-seated dissatisfaction. It ensures we are never truly content, always striving for an external validation that is, by its very nature, short-lived. So how often does your internal dialogue revolve around comparing yourself to others rather than focusing on your own path? Make this affirmation in the comment: my worth is inherent, not comparative. Let's push this confrontation further. The ego is intrinsically linked to our fear of anonymity. In the modern landscape where every achievement, every meal, every fleeting thought can be broadcast, the ego is in its element. It demands recognition. It screams for its individuality to be not just acknowledged but worshipped. This thirst for external validation forces us into a performance, a life lived not for ourselves, but for the perceived judgment of others. We sacrifice genuine experience at the altar of our curated image. How much of your daily effort is spent maintaining an image that your ego requires, rather than pursuing actions that genuinely fulfill your soul? Write this declaration in the comment: I will prioritize substance over superficial recognition. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his ruthless assessment of humanity, understood that true self-mastery often requires sacrificial action. The willingness to give up comfort, certainty, and even public acclaim for the sake of becoming something greater. The ego, however, is the master of preserving the comfortable self. It whispers, don't rock the boat, don't risk failure, don't dare to be misunderstood. This preservation mechanism is the very thing that stifles the Übermensch, the higher self, that Nietzsche urged humanity to strive toward. To achieve anything of true value, you must be willing to let your current ego self die. This leads us directly to the concept of necessary discomfort. Your ego is terrified of pain, confusion, and the feeling of being incompetent. It demands easy wins and smooth paths. Yet, every philosopher, every great thinker, every person who has achieved mastery has acknowledged that growth only occurs in the friction of discomfort. When you feel confused, inadequate, or challenged to your core, that is not failure. That is your ego being dismantled, brick by uncomfortable brick, to make room for something stronger. Let me ask you another question. Are you unconsciously avoiding the very situations, the hard conversations, the ambitious projects, the challenging feedback that would force you to evolve? Say this with me: I embrace discomfort as the catalyst for change. Think about the modern plague of outrage culture and relentless tribalism. This is a massive, collective, egoic defense mechanism. Our personal egos merge with a group identity, maybe a political party, an ideology, an online community, and suddenly, our self-worth is tied to that group being right and all others being wrong. This allows the individual ego to feel massive, righteous, and safe, shielded from the difficult work of independent thought and self-correction. It's cheap validation at the expense of intellectual honesty and human connection. To step out of this trap, we must cultivate what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to integrate opposing forces within the psyche. It means holding two conflicting ideas in your mind without immediately defaulting to a defense mechanism. It requires accepting that your worldview is incomplete, that your opponents may hold a piece of the truth, and that you are not, in fact, the ultimate arbiter of reality. This act of mature, self-contained paradox is fatal to the small, fragile, demanding ego. Eckhart Tolle, in The Power of Now, offers a contemporary perspective that resonates deeply with these ancient philosophies. He speaks of the pain body and the identification with thought forms, which are essentially manifestations of the ego. For Tolle, much of our suffering comes from living in the past or the future, fueled by egoic narratives, rather than inhabiting the present moment. The ego thrives on drama, on problems, on a sense of a separate self that is constantly under threat or striving for something external. Think of a time when you were truly immersed in an activity, perhaps creating art, playing music, or even just walking in nature. In those moments, when you are fully present, the nagging voice of your ego often fades. You are not thinking about what others will think, or what you should be doing. You simply are. This state of flow, of deep presence, is the antithesis of your ego's constant chatter. When do you feel most free from the incessant demands and judgments of your ego? Be intentional. Write this declaration in the comment. I choose presence over ego's narrative. Your ego is a master of self-deception. It will construct elaborate justifications for your flaws, your mistakes, and your shortcomings. It will blame external circumstances, other people, or even fate itself, rather than admit to its own role in your struggles. This inability to take responsibility is one of ego's most damaging characteristics. Without honest self-reflection, without the willingness to admit fault, growth becomes impossible. Consider the person who constantly complains about their job, their relationships, or their life circumstances, yet never takes concrete steps to change them. Often the ego is at play, comfortable in its victimhood, afraid of the discomfort that true change demands. It's easier to blame than to act. So, I ask again, in what areas of your life is your ego preventing you from taking full responsibility and initiating change? Repeat this after me. I take full ownership of my life. Ego has killed more dreams than failure ever did. It has destroyed empires, ruined relationships, silenced potentials, and blinded leaders. You can lose your soul without noise, without tragedy, simply by mistaking your ego for your true self. Now let's turn the lights on the ledger. If ego is the enemy, what is its actual cost? What is the price you pay every single day for letting this internal tyrant reign supreme? The cost is not abstract. It is quantifiable. It's paid in lost time, fractured relationships, and the silent, slow death of your highest potential. We must itemize the debt ego forces upon your soul. 1. The cost to your mind, stagnation and blindness. The ego's first demand is simple. You must be right. This need for validation acts as a cognitive muzzle. It seals your mind against contradictory evidence, sincere feedback, and new ideas. You forfeit the gift of genuine learning, becoming intellectually rigid, stuck in a loop of defending what you already believe. The consequence is intellectual atrophy, a mind that stops evolving because the ego is terrified of admitting it was, even for a moment, wrong. 2. The cost to your heart. Isolation and conflict. The ego views connection as a transaction and intimacy as a threat. It is the voice that insists you win the argument at all costs, that prevents the sincere apology, and that replays old slights, nurturing resentment like a treasured garden. You pay the price in fractured relationships. You trade deep, trusting connection, which requires vulnerability and humility, for the shallow, temporary satisfaction of feeling superior or justified. The ego prefers to rule over a desert than serve in a community. 3. The cost to your spirit. Chronic suffering and fragility. Beneath the ego's mask of arrogance is profound insecurity. It demands that your self-worth be tied to the unstable chaos of external factors, your job title, your bank account, the approval of strangers. This makes happiness conditional and short-lived. When these external props are removed, the ego collapses, revealing the emotional fragility it worked so hard to conceal. You are left with chronic anxiety and a constant low-grade fear of exposure. 4. The cost to your potential, inaction and sabotage. The ego is the master of preserving the comfortable self. It whispers of the shame of failure and the burden of expectation. It sabotages your most ambitious plans by introducing procrastination, avoidance, and the perfect excuse. You either fail to start out of fear of wounding your self-image, or you subconsciously sabotage your success to prevent the pressure that comes with elevated status. The true cost here is your unlived life, the dreams that never escape the confines of your own head. 5. The ultimate cost. Loss of presence and authenticity. Ultimately, the ego forces you to live a life that is not your own. It keeps you restrained to a narrative, a thought form, dragging you into the past with regret, or forcing you into the future with ceaseless anxiety and ambition. It consumes your energy maintaining a polished, false image for the world. The greatest cost is the forfeiture of the present moment and the chance to experience life with raw, unfettered authenticity. You sacrifice the real self for the demanding shadow. This is the debt. You can choose to continue paying it, or you can choose the difficult, honest work of confronting the creditor. The choice and the liberation is yours. We often confuse ego with confidence. True confidence, however, is a quiet knowing, a deep-seated belief in one's abilities that doesn't need to shout or dominate. Ego, on the other hand, is loud, boastful, and often fragile. It needs constant external validation to sustain itself. When that validation is absent, the ego can crumble, revealing the insecurity it was desperately trying to conceal. Imagine a truly talented artist or athlete. Their confidence is evident in their performance, their dedication, their willingness to learn. They don't need to constantly remind everyone of their achievements. Their work speaks for itself. The ego, on the contrary, would be the one constantly seeking accolades, comparing their work to others, and feeling disrespected if not sufficiently praised. Let me ask another question. Is your confidence rooted in genuine ability or in the fragile need for external approval? Make this affirmation in the comment, "My true power lies beyond ego's validation." Your ego also manifests as the voice of certainty, even when certainty is unwarranted. It convinces you that you know best, that your opinions are facts, and that dissenting viewpoints are simply wrong. This closes you off to learning, to new perspectives, and to the inherent complexity of the world. Humility, the antidote to ego, allows you to remain open, to question your own assumptions, and to embrace the vastness of what you don't know. Think of the intellectual who refuses to engage in genuine debate, instead resorting to dismissive remarks or attacks. This isn't a sign of superior intellect. It's a sign of an ego desperately trying to protect its perceived intellectual fortress. True intelligence is characterized by curiosity, openness, and a willingness to revise one's understanding. Are you truly open to challenging your deeply held beliefs, or does your ego prevent genuine intellectual inquiry? Make this declaration with me. I embrace humility and continuous learning. The foundational Christian tradition recognizes the ego, often defined as the flesh or the old self, as a primary obstacle to genuine faith, spiritual maturity, and living out God's calling. The scriptures advocate for the practice of self-denial and taking up one's cross, a continual process of surrendering the will and placing the self in subjection to the divine. This is not about self-hatred or annihilation, but rather about putting the old, prideful self to death so that Christ may live through us. It means dethroning the individual ego from its position of ultimate authority and repositioning it in its proper place, as a tool, not a master. Meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry are powerful practices for observing the ego in action without being consumed by it. When you sit in silence and simply observe your thoughts, you begin to see the ego's incessant commentary, its judgments, its desires, and its fears. And by observing it, you create a space between you and it, realizing that you are not your thoughts, you are not your ego, you are the awareness that observes them. So, what practices can you adopt to observe your ego without letting it control your inner man? Make this affirmation with me. I will cultivate awareness to observe my ego. Your ego also feeds on drama and conflict. It loves to be right, even at the cost of harmony and connection. It will stir up resentment, hold grudges, and replay perceived disrespect, all to maintain its sense of victimhood or superiority. True strength lies not in winning every argument, but in cultivating peace, understanding, and compassion, qualities the ego often views as weaknesses. Consider the argument that escalates unnecessarily, where both parties are more invested in winning than in finding a resolution. That's the ego at play, fueled by the need to be right, to save face. What if instead, one person chose to de-escalate, to listen with an open mind, to prioritize the relationship over their ego's demands? The outcome would be vastly different. So, how do we begin to disarm this enemy within? It's not about eradicating the ego entirely. That's an impossible and perhaps undesirable task, as the ego serves a function in navigating the world. It's about understanding it, recognizing its patterns, and consciously choosing not to be enslaved by its dictates. It's about dethroning the ego from its position as absolute ruler and instead making it a useful but subservient part of our psychological landscape. One crucial step is to cultivate self-awareness, to observe your thoughts, your reactions, your emotional responses, and to ask yourself, is this coming from a place of genuine purpose and wisdom? Or is it the ego seeking validation, protection, or control? This self-inquiry is uncomfortable, yes, but it is the crucible in which true character is forged. Another powerful tool is the practice of self-compassion. The ego often thrives on self-criticism and judgment. When we can extend kindness and understanding to ourselves, even in our imperfections, we begin to dismantle the ego's need to present a flawless facade. It allows us to be authentically human, flaws and all, without feeling the constant pressure to live up to an impossible ideal. Imagine a friend making a mistake. Would you berate them mercilessly or offer support and understanding? Why do we so often reserve the harshest criticism for ourselves? When you practice self-compassion, you weaken the ego's stronghold, creating a space for genuine healing and growth. Let's make this declaration in the comment: I embrace self-compassion as a path to liberation. The journey of understanding and managing your ego is not a destination, but a continuous process. It requires vigilance, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to self-improvement. It means stepping out of the comfortable illusions your ego constructs and into the often uncomfortable truth of who you are and who you aspire to become. It means accepting that you don't know everything, that you will make mistakes, and that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a profound strength. This is the path to true freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of the enemy within. It is a path that offers not easy answers, but profound transformation. It demands courage. It demands introspection. But the reward is a life lived with authenticity, purpose, and a deeper connection to the world around you. The enemy within is not invincible. It thrives in the shadows of unawareness and self-deception. But when we shine the light of consciousness upon it, when we confront its tricks and its whispers, we begin to take back control. This is not a battle to be won, but a relationship to be redefined. A relationship where your ego serves rather than dictates. We have unmasked the enemy. We've itemized the crushing debt the ego demands, the price paid in peace, in relationships, and in potential. You have heard the whispers, you have seen the chains, and now you stand at the threshold of a choice. The true work begins not in listening to philosophy, but in living it. You can leave this conversation and allow the ego to smoothly transition back to its tyrannical routine, or you can commit to the brutal, necessary act of self-sovereignty. This call to action is not a suggestion. It is a declaration of war on your own complacency. For the next 24 hours, I challenge you to be a ruthless observer. Whenever you feel a sharp pang of envy, a blinding urge to be right, or a strong need to defend your image, stop. Recognize the ego speaking, name it, and choose the opposite action. When your ego demands to be right, choose silence and understanding. When your ego demands praise, choose humble service. When your ego demands comfort, choose the most difficult task. Commit to this assignment. Do not seek easy answers, seek profound change. If this video resonated with the sleeping potential within you, then subscribe to this channel. This is not a place for comfort. It is a forge for consciousness. Share this video with the person you know who is currently enslaved by their own narrative. Thank you for joining me on this profound exploration. Until next time, dare to reflect, dare to change, dare to live.